Grassroots is a physical therapy practice that was designed to really listen and look at people as individuals and holistically. We treat all kinds of injuries and ailments for all types of mountain athletes, climbers, bikers, runners. We really specialize in helping people understand what is going on with them and then how they can be an active part of their treatment and recovery.
So at Grassroots, none of our patients leave without understanding what's happening in their body and without knowing how to prevent another onset of their injury. Our last session with them is always making sure that they understand how to maintain injury-free, how to maintain their high level of activity, and how to prevent it from coming on again. My favorite part of Grassroots Physical Therapy is that we are part of Terra Health Collective, which includes Grassroots, Streamlined Pilates, Evergreen Healing, which is nutrition, food relationship counseling, exercise relationship counseling, Chinese medicine and acupuncture with Valenti Acupuncture. We have Into the Woods Wellness, Hello Wellness, and that's going to be different types of meditation and yoga and life coaching and Thai massage. And with this health collective, we really get to help somebody dive deep into whatever the holistic approach may be for their injury and state. Hello, I'm Dr. Amy Frugé.
I'm Dr. Sarah McNurlin.
We work at Grassroots Physical Therapy in Salt Lake City. We treat lots of climbers, skiers, runners, mountain bikers, mountain athletes of all sorts, and we're excited to introduce to you the Advanced Upper Extremity Strength and Stability Workshop.
So today we will go over a warm-up, some basic anatomy to help you understand kind of what's going on in your shoulders and arms and how you can understand how anatomy plays into how we want to strength train in proper form.
We really miss doing clinics with you all, so we hope that this feels like a live clinic. If you're able to pause and kind of go through the movements with us, great. If not, you might want to take notes the first round through and then roll back through the exercises either through your notes or through the video with us. If you end up having any questions, we will give our contact information at the end, and we would love to hear from you, whether it's questions or feedback.
We'll be queuing for kind of our commonly seen things we queue for in the clinic, but if you feel like you need an adaptation that we didn't provide for you, or you have questions about like, I'm not that mobile or I'm not that strong, we can provide some modifications for you via email or reach out to us.
And our goal, again, through this workshop is to take lowest intensity to highest intensity options and more so give you the why. So if we give you this foundation of what principles to walk through all of your exercises with, then we will have succeeded throughout the workshop so that you can then prosper with all your movements. Equipment that you might need, you can do it with just an open space, but some things that may make it more comfortable would be a yoga mat and or a kettlebell, dumbbell, milk jug, vat of oil, whatever it might be. Something that you can practice moving some weight around with. If you don't have that, that's okay. You can still get the movement in with us. So here's our warm-up. This is my favorite warm-up for climbing. It's brief, it's intentional, and we're starting from proximal to distal. So we're starting proximal because everything that connects to your spine has to respond to your spine. So if your spine's not moving well, this stuff's not gonna move as well either. So starting with some thoracic extension, and you can do this seated, standing, or we're demoing here on our knees, which can be nice and easy at the climbing gym. But starting with some seated cat-cows to get just the thoracic spine and less of the lumbar spine, keep your hips on your heels. And for the cat-cow, as you exhale, round your chest forward, round your shoulders forward, tuck your chin into your chest. And on your inhale, do the opposite. Arching your mid-back, rolling your shoulders back, squeezing your shoulder blades, bring your chin all the way back for the cervical extension. There's the end of your inhale, and then exhale, round everything again. Rounding mid-back, rounding shoulders, chin tucks to chest. And on your inhale, arching So get several rounds of this in. I usually do between 5 and 10. And as you get through a few more, you can change your speed up.
I'll sometimes kind of like wiggle around here too if you find a spot that feels really sticky.
And once you've done 5 to 10 of those, that's flexion and extension. We're going to take that and expand on a little bit. With the flexion and extension, we're going to add a little bit of rotation. I call this one the sprinkler. You can do it at the climbing gym and at the clubs post-COVID. Placing one hand on your knee and maybe even on the mat if you're pretty bendy. Still keep your hips on your heels. If you find your hips wiggling about, that's a different dance move that we're not covering in this warm-up. So keep your hips glued to your heels, and then opposite hand reaches back behind per sprinkler move. On your inhale, still extending, arching your back, and you're using your eyes and your elbows to look as far away as you can. And then on your exhale, flex just like you did in the last stretch, but bring your elbow to your opposite hand. And then inhale, start with that extension. So the arching of the back, arching of the neck, and then continue looking further away. Exhale, round. Keep moving here with your breath. And make sure that you're really extending through your spine and then looking further. Sarah, you're gonna be sprinkler extraordinaire. Good, and then exhale, rounds around the chin. As you're doing this, more than just mobility, you're also getting this scapular or posterior shoulder girdle stabilization and activation. So this arm is pushing hard into the ground. This one is pushing hard further away and then rounding again. So getting your shoulder stabilizers already fired up. That's probably number 4, yes? Good. Okay, if that's 5, then we'll switch sides and do the same thing. So planting, right arm down, starting, you can exhale round or start with the inhale open, great. Good. Exhale rounding. And Sarah maybe was a salsa dancer in her last life because her hips are all over the place. Really, she's trying not to move her thoracic spine and is getting more lumbar spine, which is okay, except that we really want this thoracic spine to get most of the motion. You can spread your knees a little wider to get a better base, and then keep your hips super glued as you extend and arch.
It's just so tight, Amy.
You're cheating a lot, Sarah. Good. Exhale, round. Good, and again with this, starting with a few slow ones, and then if you want to increase your speed, anytime you're warming up or stretching before climbing, it should always be dynamic, meaning moving through the motion. You don't want to do a static or a holding stretch beforehand. All right, now that we've done the sprinkler, so we've started with our flexion extension, then our rotation and our thoracic spine, we're getting a little more shoulder activation next, and these are called shoulder taps. And you'll start with elbows pretty close to your face, tapping on your shoulder blades. Should feel a nice tricep stretch through here. And then going in the complete opposite motion, arms are gonna go back behind you, and then hands extend. So you're getting this wrist extension and a nice forearm and bicep stretch. So repeating through that, tapping on your shoulder blades, elbows as high up as they can go, and then extend for the nice bicep and forearm stretch. Once I get a couple of these in, then I like to pick up my speed. And as speed picks up, I can go even faster and get a much better stretch. These I usually do 10 of, so more than 5, getting fast.
What should my trunk be doing?
So definitely staying active through your trunk. If you're moving all over the place, like maybe both of us just were, then you're not isolating what you're trying to get in through here. Good. Okay. Yes. Excellent. So roughly 10 of those shoulder taps. And now again, proximal to distal, we're moving our way down. So these are tendon glides for elbow and wrists. And with these, still sitting up tall, and you're gonna start everything in a really shortened position. So these are T-Rex hands, and I'm shortened all through my fingers, through my forearms, elbows, and then you're gonna tell the dog to lay down. Good. T-Rex hands. Tell the dog to lay down. Excellent. So going from a shortened to a lengthened position, and imagine that somebody's trying to pull your fingertips up as you're doing this. Good. And with these two, starting slow and then working quicker. So you're getting good activation in both your flexors and your extensors. And if you do these quickly and more than 10 of them, you might get a little pump. That's okay. Good, making sure to get that wrist extension at the bottom. Awesome. So elbow and wrist tendon glides. So our tendons are what connects our muscles to our bones, and they're through some really small spaces. So getting to glide those before is super helpful. And then finally, some finger tendon glides. Now this isn't specific to our shoulder exercise here, but super specific to climbing. So I like to share these. Keeping everything up tall since we just got all this moving well. And starting with a fist where you show your fingernails and then you hide your fingernails. And sock puppet, bear claw, scary high five. Show your fingernails, hide your fingernails, sock puppet, bear claw, scary high five. Keep going. Great. So with these, you'll notice that you go from a lengthened to a shortened to a lengthened position on repeat. If any of these feel sticky, maybe you incorporate more of these in your warm-up. So for me, these first few, these feel fine, but these feel so sticky for me, so I know that that's where I need more of my tendon glides, and so often I just do this fun squid action before I climb. I often recommend 10 to 30 of these because tendons in through here, especially for climbing multiple days a week, they're gonna need more gliding than some of the other spaces. Those are your tendon glides. There's your proximal to distal warm-up. Hope you enjoy.
So we're gonna go over a little bit of anatomy so that you guys understand kind of why we even do these exercises in the first place and how you can protect yourself and prevent injuries when you're climbing. So one of the most important things to know about our shoulder, this is kind of like Amy's right shoulder here, is there are a number of joints that all have to move together effectively in order for your arm to go all the way overhead. So when she lifts her arm overhead, she's actually moving like 4 or 5 joints simultaneously to make this motion happen. So it's a pretty complex structure and set of systems here. But one thing to note is there's actually not a lot of bony stability. So unlike our hip joint, which is kind of this big ball and socket, we just have this tiny little surface that our ball kind of interacts with. And so because of that, it's really important for our shoulder stabilizer muscles to give our joint support. And so those shoulder stabilizer muscles are your rotator cuff. So your rotator cuff comes in front and then on either side of the back of your shoulder blade. And that kind of encapsulates your ball and socket joint to provide support. So yeah, kind of these guys right here. And then we've got a second group of muscles that attach from your shoulder blade onto your trunk. So if Amy turns around here, we're talking about kind of these ones, your rhomboids, your lower traps, your serratus, kind of all these guys that help maneuver your shoulder blade. When you move your arm overhead, your shoulder blade and your ball and socket joint have to move simultaneously in order to not get pinchy. So if her arm goes up, but her shoulder blade stays glued to her side, she's gonna actually kind of get sticky there. And so if you have range of motion deficit or kind of pinchy at the top, it's likely because your shoulder blade isn't moving effectively. And we can strengthen and kind of mobilize through that warm-up we just did, but also through some of these shoulder stabilizing exercises, they're gonna get that shoulder blade functioning a little bit better for you too. So we have a set of 3 rules that we use for all of our strength training and even climbing to help kind of get that anatomy functioning more appropriately. So I'll have Amy in hands and knees. All right, Amy, so the first rule that we're gonna talk about is actually our elbow creases. When our elbow creases are pointing away from each other, that actually puts our shoulder in a neutral position. So when you get in your hands and knees position, you'll probably notice that you're like this. And what that does is that puts our rotator cuff in a sort of disadvantaged position. So if we rotate these here, all of a sudden we've got equal contribution between kind of our anterior and our posterior rotator cuff muscles.
Front and back.
Yes. So, Amy, does that feel tight on your forearm?
Maybe.
A little bit, yeah. If you're having trouble getting your arms to rotate all the way, I would recommend spending a little bit more time doing our warm-up exercises to kind of get these loose. That can be a limiting factor for people. So when she's here, if I give her pressure, she can accept quite a bit of load. If she rotates those in and I give her pressure, I can just drop her. And so when you're climbing, you want that nice, stable position with those elbow creases rotated. So you can try this at home and kind of tell the difference. Like, do you feel stronger one way versus the other? So that's rule one, will be elbow creases are gonna be rotated forward or away from each other. The second thing is we wanna get those shoulder stability muscles that attach to our shoulder blade to be engaged. So our shoulder blades go in 4 directions, so they can kind of pinch down and in. They can spread away and out. They can shrug to her shoulders, and then they can pull down, okay? In order for these to be activated in a really efficient way, we want to be kind of in the middle of all that. So she's gonna press just a little bit away and create this nice flat tabletop. So this tabletop is what we'll want to see in your planks, in your push-ups, and kind of all the other exercises we cue for. So if you are having kind of that dip, we're gonna ask you to press your shoulder blades away and really engage the side muscles here. Okay, and then the last thing we're looking for is that she's got a nice posture where her low back, mid back, and head are all on the same line. Again, that's gonna allow her muscles that attach to her spine to be more effective and more efficient. So in this position, I should be able to kind of put all my body weight on her, and she's solid. If she did any of those wrong, it doesn't take much force to break that. So that's a little anatomy lesson. So the first rule is those elbow creases are always going to be rotated forward. The second rule is that we're looking for shoulder blades to be engaged in that nice neutral position. And then the final rule is that you're looking for complete trunk to be straight.
I would maybe add too what some people often do when they think that they're engaging their shoulders in this position is they start to round their spine. So they try to push away from the ground from their spine instead of pushing away from their shoulders. And this is the important motion that we need for climbing and our shoulder stabilizers.
Yeah, so it's different than that cat-cow we did in our warm-up. It's more about kind of pressing those shoulder blades flat. So one crucial thing about shoulder anatomy is that our shoulder blade has to rotate out in order to allow for enough space for this joint, the ball and socket, to move. So as arm lifts up, the shoulder blade tilts and this tilts. So if we watch on Amy here, you can see her shoulder blade comes around, and then when she drops her arm, that shoulder blade kind of comes back down. Go one more. So we get that natural kind of rotation of that shoulder blade, and that allows for full range of motion. If this shoulder blade doesn't rotate and it's kind of stuck here, so sometimes people think they're engaging their shoulders by kind of squeezing, what that actually does is stops her range of motion. She can't get any further if this shoulder blade isn't moving correctly. So that's like us taking this and just kind of jamming it up against there. That's where the ability to activate, control, stabilize through our shoulder blade allows for that full range of motion. And then it's going to come back down. So if you're getting that clicking or kind of pinching, grabbing, this is potentially one contribution to that dysfunction, would be that your shoulder blade isn't moving in sync with the rest of your arm. Good. Yeah, we get that nice rotation. And then that creates a nice little bit of space here too. If she unwinds, and then if she's kind of elevated, and then she does that, again, she gets pinchy, kind of runs out of space there. The other thing that influences shoulder blade is actually thoracic spine. So if Amy rolls into that slumped position, and then she tries to lift her arms overhead, she doesn't get that full movement through that shoulder blade or the full range of motion. So if you've been sitting at a desk all day and you just jump into climbing without warming up or without mobilizing your spine, you might feel like you don't have enough range of motion to do what you want. And so when she's upright, that's a nice natural shoulder position.
Here are side plank progressions. We're going to talk through how to apply the same 3 principles for your anatomy in your side plank. And side planks are awesome for shoulder stability, core stability, and research proven to be the most glute activation in a side plank. So lots of reasons for climbers especially to have a nice progression. And I'll start you with what would be the lowest intensity and then take you up to the highest intensity as Sarah attempts to hold all of it while I explain the things to you. So please assume your side plank, dear Sarah. Great, so she's starting on her knees right now, which means much of her weight is offloaded. This is a great place to start, and she's gonna apply those same 3 principles. So elbow pit is exposed, and then shoulder blades really engaged. So she's not sinking into it, she's pushing the ground away from her shoulder blade, and then using this bar to make sure that she has that 3rd principle, her spine in line. And this bar is touching her hips, her mid-back, and then the back of her head. So you might get to do a lovely little chin tuck to make sure that you're in line there, ears over shoulders. Great. So if being on your knees feels pretty easy, then you can send your feet out long. Now you're holding more of your weight and have your feet staggered. So her feet are further away from each other to help distribute her weight a little bit better. You can even squeeze them in further. And she's holding in her 3 principles strong. From there, you can progress to feet stacked, one on top of the other. Excellent. And if that feels pretty easy, you can raise one leg up. Sarah's doing great so far. We're going to keep seeing how far she can go. So if she lowers that leg down, can she do some hip dips? Nice. So making this more dynamic now. Great. And then if those hip dips feel easy, then you can take into some twists with your upper body. Good. We rolled through those really fast. So if you want to pause and rewind through any of those, you can. Some different things to think about. So those different progressions you can take through and try to hold them for a certain amount of seconds. You can try to add in any of the more dynamic movements for a certain amount of reps, working your way up. I would say too, if your goal is shoulder stability, having your arm out long and being on your hand like Sarah was, as opposed to having your weight on your elbow, which would be more targeting core stability because there's just less degrees of freedom that you're working with here. So depending on what your goal is how you can prioritize elbow versus tall plank.
This is also, if you guys are runners, this is a really lovely one for the same group of muscles that often contributes to knee pain for running. Give these to my runners.
Yeah, so so that this feels like a live video, you can pause here and for the next minute, see what variation you like to work with.
So the next thing we're going to go over is a sort of like a yoga transition. So we're going to go from dolphin to plank and back and forth, and then also from dolphin to down dog. One thing that we're focusing on for this series is what's called closed kinetic chain, which means that your hands or arms are fixed on a surface. That's really important for developing these stabilizer muscles versus, say, like lifting weights. That's going to give you a little bit different input. Because we spend part of our time climbing with our arms fixed on surfaces, it's really important for us to have that really solid stability when our arm is on something. So Amy, go ahead. Let's get you into dolphin. So even though her elbows are on the ground here, she's still gonna have those same 3 principles. So she's gonna be trying to open up as much as she can. In this position, she's actually going to kind of pull her shoulder blades this way. So she's got this nice space here that looks beautiful. And then we're gonna go from dolphin into a plank. So she's gonna slide her torso kind of forward and come into that plank position. Lift up a little bit through here, there you go. And then go back into that dolphin. So for this transition, we're looking for nice connection to those shoulder blade muscles. Go ahead and go back and forth at your own pace, Amy. Give me a little bit more lift here. Yeah, and she's doing great. Go ahead and lift. Good. One more into that plank. Stay lifted, and her spine is perfect. Good. Good. Okay, take a break from there. And the next one we're gonna do is a dolphin to down dog. So let's start in down dog for this one. And if you guys have ever done yoga, you spend a lot of time in down dog, so we wanna make sure that you're getting kind of proper form for that too. So she's gonna open up those elbow creases, get that space, and then the important thing here is this head position. So again, even here, she's maintaining that nice neutral neck. Oftentimes when you're in this position, your head's doing all kinds of weird stuff. Yeah, we want that head to be not at a concert, COVID. Okay, go ahead and go into your dolphin from here. Yes, and then press up. Good. Amy, what do you feel working?
My shoulders.
Yeah, these are shoulder burners.
My core.
Good. And she's got this nice solid position here. Awesome. Go ahead and take a break. So that was our dolphin to plank and our dolphin to down dog transitions. You can either kind of string those all together, or you can do them individually. This is also something you could incorporate into your yoga class, kind of in and around a flow that's already been established.
What I love about those, especially in addition to when Sarah explained the anatomy and the being on a tabletop position, is that you're now taking those principles and your shoulder stabilizers into an overhead position, which is climbing. And so being able to control and approximate, so like the ground pushing against you, in an overhead position is much more similar to climbing, and especially changing elbow height, changing the pressure, changing your angle. These are all excellent ways to teach your shoulders how to be strong through overhead positions.
So this next exercise is actually going to be a series of exercises kind of all strung together. We all get bored of doing like the same one exercise over and over again. So this is a fun one to kind of play with. We're going to flow some stuff together. So we're going to start in a plank position. So Amy can get ready for that. Good. And so same 3 rules. You'll hear this over and over and over again, but they're useful. Go ahead and give me a little bit more shoulder lift here. Yeah. Okay. And then she's going to go into a push-up. Good. And then we'll have her do a shoulder tap and a shoulder tap. And then let's open up into a side plank. Good. Stay nice and tall through there. And then flip into that reverse plank. You got it. And kind of open those shoulders. Lovely. And then flip back into that side plank. Good. And then roll into your kind of plank position. And then we'll do our shoulder taps. Tap, tap, and with a push up. And then we'll go back. Good. Open, flip, flip. So here she's keeping her trunk nice and long, which we love. Go ahead at your own pace, Amy. These you can make harder or easier by adding more shoulder taps, adding more push-ups, spending more or less time in each of these positions. Good. Flip. I like this reverse because it gets that posterior chain. So we're getting glutes, we're getting low back, we're getting hamstrings. All of these are really useful for climbing, kind of generating that power, that kind of getting you prepped for some maybe heel hooks. Good. And then push up, come back. You could potentially add something else into this mix if you had your favorite kind of plank maneuver, or she could lift one leg to make that harder. Yes. Flip. Woohoo! Yeah, so you can get really creative. The nice thing about planks is if you're doing the foundational stuff right, then you can get really creative and mix it up and get a bunch of other muscles on board. So that is our kind of plank flow series.
Give that a try. Next, we're talking about dips. Dips are my favorite antagonist exercise for climbing for so many reasons. When you're in a dip, you're opening up your chest, which is one, the opposite of how we climb, two, the opposite of how we work, how we eat, how we spend our time texting, reading, whatever. Like we live in this kyphotic or rounded forward motion. And so just like what Sarah is being a perfect demonstration for you. Thank you. So dips help open up our chest. They also extend your shoulders, so you're getting a nice stretch through here. And then they're a pushing motion because we do lots of pulling motion in climbing. So we're gonna demo, Sarah's gonna demo kind of our lowest impact or lowest load to upwards on a dip while using our 3 principles. So Sarah's starting on a mat with her feet pretty close. Elbow pits are forward. Good, and chest is super open, and your spine might not be the perfect straight, but you're not going to be dipping your head forward, which is what everybody does. No, none of this. Okay, so push yourself up. Good, chest is open. Great, and her elbows are bending straight back, so they're not chicken winging out as she's dipping. Excellent, elbows are going straight back. Good, and if this is pretty easy, then she can walk her feet further out, so she's holding more of her body weight. And elbows go straight back. Good. And Sarah's like all kinds of bendy, so her elbows are almost going towards each other. But I would say for the normal population, push them just straight behind you. How do you do that? Good, so she went from knees super bent to knees super straight. You can find any variation in between to let your dips be right for you. Excellent. And then you can progress to a chair, a couch, a bed, a hopefully firm surface. And let's try this way. Yeah. Yeah. All right, so okay, we'll hold here. Okay, so start with your knees bent. Yeah, hips really close to the surface. Yeah, like she's just dropping straight down. Awesome, so she's got a nice long spine. Elbow pits are still facing forward. Elbows are pointing straight back. She is offloading some of her weight with her knees bent. She's not jutting her chin forward. And then if she wanted to make that a little bit more difficult, she can walk her feet further out. Great. Awesome, so you can take it really slow to work through stability. You can make it more powerful and do it quickly. Great, and this is just with like at-home equipment, but of course at the gym, if there are parallel bars or even just specific dip bars, you can do those. And I would recommend using, typically there's a bar that's in front of you whenever you're doing dips there that will prevent you from this or this. And so if you can keep your torso as straight as the bar that's in front of you whenever you're doing dips on parallel bars, then that is what I most recommend while keeping your 3 principles.
And if you have really tight, like anterior shoulders, it will be kind of difficult for you to keep that chunk upward. And so that's, again, one of those reasons why we want to work on mobility. Mobility is the key to stability in some ways, because if we can't access those muscle groups appropriately because they're too short or too tight, they don't do their job.
Mm-hmm. And so maybe even stretching in the dip position before you get into it can be helpful too, or just using, like Sarah was doing on the chair or on the mat, that as a stretch before you even start. Happy dipping.
All right, so the next thing we're gonna do is transition to a little bit more of an explosive move, but we're gonna do that via a push-up. I wanna make sure everyone has a foundational push-up kind of in their back pocket before you do any of the really explosive stuff. We treat a lot of finger elbow stuff related to actually like poor push-ups. People bust out a whole bunch of not so great push-ups. So we like to start unloaded just so everyone can kind of get a feel for the form. So I'd highly encourage you find a wall or a chair to start this, even if you feel like your push-ups are perfect. So we're still gonna keep those 3 rules. The first rule is gonna be kind of those elbow creases. Good, and then press those shoulder blades out a little bit more for me, Amy. Yeah, and then she's got her nice line there. And then go ahead and go into a push-up. What we're looking for is that she stays connected here and is nice and narrow. You wanna be less than 45 degrees, and then go ahead and push up. The other thing is you should be active through these shoulder stabilizer muscles the entire way. So all the way down, all the way up. Go ahead and try again. So she's nice and engaged here, and then she pushes away, stays engaged. What we don't want is this kind of sagging. Yep, and then go ahead and go down. So we'll see this collapsing of shoulders all the time. That's basically putting your anterior shoulders at risk for some kind of injury. Also, her elbows are in kind of a disadvantaged position here as well. Go ahead and correct that for me. Yeah. So you see how that opened everything up quite a bit? That is a better place to be. Go and push out. Good. So if you feel like you have that, then you can start to go to some of the explosion stuff. So she's gonna go in and out from kind of a narrow to a little bit wider, still keeping elbows tucked though, and nice engagement through core. Good. So you can vary speed. You can vary kind of height you're trying to achieve. You can get tricky and do some little dance moves. Woo! We recommend, again, still staying at this upright position for a little bit before you go down onto the ground and do kind of those explosions from there. So the progression would be lowering the surface. That would make it harder. And then you can get on the ground. And then the next progression is actually to put your feet up on something. So she could do that same kind of explosion technique with her feet elevated like this. And then she would do her claps or whatever. So the reason why we like these power explosion things is that's a huge demand in climbing, especially as you start to climb harder things. And to be able to train that in the gym is gonna give you some confidence in some muscle memory in order to translate that onto the wall. If you have a dynamic thing that you're trying to attempt, and I'd recommend throwing in some version of this in your warm-up, actually, so that you can kind of prep those muscles for that type of load before you need to do it in performance.
Other options, so I went from middle to wide, but you can also take it into a triangle or from all three. So middle to triangle, back out wide to triangle, just playing with varying angles. And like Sarah had mentioned, I feel like everybody learned push-ups with shoulder blades down and back, which is not true because like we talked about with the shoulder kinematics beforehand, when your shoulders are in front of you, your shoulder blade, or when your arm is in front of you, your shoulder blade has to come forward. So if you're doing push-ups with your shoulder blades down and back, you're already disadvantaging your range and your activation.
And you can see she gets kind of pinchy here. So when she flattens and rounds, we get more space through this whole area. And when she's pulled back, that's kind of pinchy. It probably feels pinchy.
It feels pinchy. And I would say shoulder blades shouldn't actually be squeezed together unless your hand is past midline. So in push-ups, if you're pushing your shoulder blades away from each other when your arms are out in front of you, that's where they should be.
Yeah.
And then when your arm passes midline, then they can start to come back behind you naturally. And once your arm passes midline again, your shoulder blades should be pushing away from you again. So I highly recommend really working through push-ups in a modified position, even if your regular push-up is strong, but start in a modified position with that protracted or pushing away from the shoulder blades until elbows get to midline, and then they'll naturally come together.
Yeah, so this is where she should only get that pinch. If you're getting that kind of bringing of your shoulder blades together before that, you're losing control and you need to go back and kind of work your way up a wall first. Yeah, and you can see she engages again. So go ahead, So she's staying engaged and then she's gonna lower down.
Oh.
Yeah, nice and good. And then she gets that natural pinch here and then it's gonna spread out as she pushes away again. Yeah, and that's her kind of regaining control of that.
The last connection I would maybe help you to see too is if maybe you're a really static climber and you want to be more dynamic, or maybe there's one dynamic move in your project that you know you need to work on. Having some dynamic control and stability in your shoulders are awesome on so many levels, because even if it's you have to lock off here to pull here, or you have to have more of a push-pull relationship with one body part, maybe it's legs, maybe it's arms, but a push-pull relationship here, and just firing those different type of muscle fibers that are getting you to that fast twitch is going to be super helpful. So I would say if you're working on something that has a more dynamic feel than what you're used to, starting with some explosive push-ups in part of your warm-up can be really helpful.
One thing to take note of is where Amy's shoulder blades are when she's doing a push-up. So right now she's a little bit collapsed. What we want is her to push her shoulder blades away so that she flattens that out. That activates her serratus here, and that's going to provide her a lot of stability. So she's a little flatter here and nice and engaged through this line. Go ahead and let that pinch for a second. Yeah, so we don't want this collapsed look. You can see how she has no ability to control that. And if I push her, I'd knock her over. Go and push out again. Versus this, like I could put my whole body weight there, nice and solid. So she's gonna maintain that position as she goes into that push-up all the way down. Good, and then when she gets here, they're allowed to come because her elbows are behind her. Yep, and then she's gonna push away, activating through those shoulder blades to get that nice flat look again. Go ahead and do a couple. Good, and then push away, active, active, active. She's keeping this nice tight line through her head as well. Good. And then if she went into that dynamic motion, she'd want to maintain that the entire time. Yes. And she gets that little pinch at the end, which is great. That's where when her arms are behind her, that's allowed. And then activate through there. There it is.
This is what we don't want.
Yep.
This is not cute.
And then the other thing too is you can see when these punch together, go ahead and pinch, she loses this space here and then breaks our second roll or our third roll. And then go ahead and lift up. Yep, there we go. All right, so we are moving on to a handstand shoulder tap. There's a bunch of different modifications for this, and you can kind of scale it to be appropriate. But we like this one because you're loaded, and you're loaded in a position where there's a lot of gravity on you because you're upside down. So we're still getting that same kind of stability because hands are fixed, and then you've got the whole weight of your body and gravity on you. So Amy's going to go ahead and get set up. She's going to put her feet against the wall and then kind of go into, gracefully go into tap. From there, she's going to walk her feet up into an L position. Yeah, so if possible, this is going to be kind of your correct line. And then we still want those same rules applied. So she's going to try and rotate as much as you can. In this overhead position, you're not going to be able to complete that fully, but you want to think about actioning towards that. And then she's got good space here. So you can hold here. Another option would be to go into that shoulder tap. So she's going to lift one arm and tap, tap. So a trick here is to keep a little bit wider base of support. And then as much as you can, minimizing trunk and hip rotation. If you feel like that's easy, you can walk your legs up a little higher. Good. And do the same thing. Kind of getting yourself more into a handstand position is going to be harder. Getting yourself out of a handstand position is going to be a little bit easier. And then it kind of depends on where your legs are versus where your arms are. But find a place where you can do those effectively and safely. One thing that we don't want is that collapsing of your shoulders. Do you want to show them that position really quick?
Collapse.
Yeah.
This is an easier way to get into it. Hands down and then feet up.
Yeah. So we want this still to be lifted all the way up versus kind of collapsed down. And you can see she's got a little less control through her arms when she's in that collapsed position. Advanced move here would also be to do a handstand push-up. That's acceptable as well.
The closer you walk your hands in towards the wall, the more vertical you're going to be, the more upright you're going to be. If you're working your way up from your COVID strength to that, that's fine. Start with your L sit. Sarah's now going to demonstrate Turkish get-ups. If you have a weight, preferably a kettlebell. If you don't have a kettlebell, you can use a dumbbell. If you don't have a dumbbell and you're at home, you can use, I think one of my patients told me that one Costco-sized jug of oil, one Costco-sized jug of vegetable oil is close to 8 pounds. So if you have that, use that. You can use a jug of water. You can use your rack if you're a rope climber. So find something to be of weight. It is nice to start this with some weight and some approximation so that you don't cheat your way through this movement. There are a lot of other YouTube videos that will explain this in way more detail than what we're explaining it here. Our purposes here are just to give you another option for shoulder stability, and then you can YouTube all the nitty-gritties and specifics of it afterwards. But things to keep in mind while we're doing our Turkish get-ups here. Still staying active through your shoulder, keeping engaged through here. And I'll point out some of the things that that will be of use here, as long as Sarah, if I don't keep Sarah there forever, and she won't get mad at me. So starting with your Turkish get-up, you're gonna start with your arms straight out. Good. And then go ahead, Sarah, pop up. You're gonna pop up onto your elbow. And the idea is to keep your hand over your opposite arm the whole time. And then she's gonna pop up again. Good, and pop her hips. Good, so from here, glutes are super engaged, shoulders super engaged, this shoulder's super engaged, and then swinging the opposite leg through. Good, so now hips are forward and she's in a lunge position. Great, and then keeping this stability as she stands up. Muy bonita. Okay, and then doing the exact opposite as she goes back down.
One thing to think is keep those ribs down here.
Yeah. Good, so not arching through here, pulling your rib cage into your hip bones. Arms are still straight, good. And she's keeping kettlebell directly over the opposite hand. Good. Dropping hips down, coming down onto her elbow, lying back down. Good, so you can see her shoulder gets to rotate through a lot of different angles and move through abduction, adduction, different rotations, different varying degrees of flexion. Can we demo a couple more times?
Yeah, one thing to think about too is trying to keep your wrist neutral versus letting it collapse as much as you can.
So she's punching out, good. Core's engaged, great. Coming up and hips up here, good. Stepping all the way through his hips stay, good. Awesome, so she's got nice rotation. If we were to go back to our 3 principles right now, would she get them? So elbow pit is looking good, and spine is nice and long, core is engaged. She isn't too much shoulder at her ear, shoulder down by her hips. She's right in the center. She's loving holding this, and now she's gonna stand up. Good, and then as she's standing, like she said, core's engaged here, pulling through there. Good, as she's rolling through this, if you feel comfortable, you can join in. If not, you can be taking notes. Good. Excellent. Turkish get-ups, enjoy. Next exercise is called Turkish triangle. So use your kettlebell weight or whatever apparatus you are using to then get into a triangle position with your legs. And similar to the Turkish get-up, arm's gonna go straight up overhead, and Sarah's gonna reach all the way down towards her leg as she keeps the same angle of the kettlebell all the way throughout. So notice that she's getting some of that rotational aspect through her shoulder. Good. External rotation there, internal through there. Good, she's still keeping that long, tall spine. What's awesome about this is you're getting your shoulder stabilization, but also you're getting hamstring lengthening. If you're having troubles with heel hooks, you can work through like different angles of bending so that you are activating those hamstrings in a heel hook fashion as you're doing this, and at the same time working on your shoulder stability. If this feels pretty easy and you have a kettlebell at home, you can take the kettlebell and invert it. So now you're also working on grip strength and some wrist stabilization as keeping kettlebell straight up overhead. Sarah's gonna keep rolling so that you guys can give this some tries. And we're really just seeing how many triangles Sarah can do with this inverted.
You guys can also take your dumbbell and hold it from like the bottom to get this same effect. But it does add quite a bit of instability. And so that's gonna make you use those stabilizer muscles quite a bit more.
Turkish triangles. Here's our kettlebell plank pull through. So Sarah's going to be in a plank position, still demonstrating the 3 principles. Elbow pits are forward, shoulders are really engaged. If she had a bar on her back, her hips, Push down your back a little bit. Keep this booty up. There you go. Good. So her thoracic spine was up a little bit. And then she's got a nice angled chin here. So 3 points of contact, head, back, and then low back. So as she's holding those 3 contacts, and specifically the shoulder that is stabilizing stays super strong, pushing the ground away, she's gonna pull the kettlebell through as far over as she can. Good. And then reach across with her opposite hand to pull back through. Good. Having something heavy with quite a bit of friction can make this feel really nice. Other ways to really challenge yourself are, can you keep your core engaged and keep your hips from swiveling side to side? And taking a wider stance can be helpful for that. And as she's pushing through, so this shoulder is what's really pushing the ground away. Good. And breathing, also helpful as you're doing it. And good, she's keeping elbow pit exposed, stabilizing shoulder, nice and engaged, and reaching as far as you can. So you can even, as she pulls that one further, now try to twist further. Twist, 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 twist. Yeah, nice. Good. So she's getting more of twist, 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 twist. Yes, good. Sarah's so happy to be doing this right now. Twist, 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 twist. Good. Very nice. Kettlebell pull-throughs. So these pull-throughs are awesome for working your obliques, which can be really nice for a lot of the rotational movement that happens in climbing, especially roof climbing. If you're holding on here and trying to twist toe all the way across through there, or holding on here, have some good feet and trying to twist into something while you're locking off here, the pull-throughs can be an excellent way to work your obliques in this manner.
And you can emphasize this for either strength or for range of motion, kind of both. So without the weight, you could push like a sock or a cup or something as far as you can get it, and then come out of that. And then just try and reach for each of those zones every single time you do it. So you can do this unloaded as well.
Tupperware lids are really nice to slide in multiple directions with and see how far you can get those Tupperware lids on carpet. Yeah, enjoy.
All right, so you guys survived some strength training and some dynamic stability stuff. Hopefully you learned a lot. We want to end with a little cool down. This you can do after strength training. You can also do some variation of this at the crag or at the gym. It's nice just to get those shoulders a little bit of love after you've been doing a really heavy shoulder exercise. So we're gonna start with kind of a lat tricep stretch. For this you can use a chair or really any kind of surface coffee table. Anything you can find at the gym. And Amy's gonna kneel down, and then we'll start with just hands on the chair. Yep, and then she's gonna slide her bum back and lower her trunk down, just trying to kind of open up through all of the front body there. You should feel a pretty good stretch across kind of pecs and lats, and kind of wiggling around. You can really emphasize different parts of that back body. Yeah. Still be mindful of your kind of shoulder anatomy here. And so, yeah, opening up those elbow creases and just making sure those shoulders aren't completely collapsed. Good. You can kind of move in and out of that for 30 seconds, or you can static hold for 30 seconds. I like to then transition this one into more of a tricep. So she's gonna hold that block, and then elbows are gonna go on the table there. And then she's gonna get in that same position and then just bring that block kind of overhead. Good. And this block just allows you to make sure you're keeping good form with that. If you don't have a yoga block, you can use a paper towel roll, kind of same thing. Everyone's gotten creative with their home workouts, so this is a nice tool for that.
I would say the more that you bend your elbows, the more tricep stretch you're gonna feel. So if you're wanting lat, you can do less bend. If you're wanting lat and tricep, you can do more bend at the elbows. I have my hands fanned out, so I'm really working that external rotation or that elbow pit exposed movement to help with all the things that Sarah has already said. If you don't feel a stretch here, a really nice way to move it even more intense or increase the stretch is to bring your elbows even closer together. And when they're real close together there, you might not be able to go down as far, but you might feel more of a stretch. So play with that angle there. The closer your elbows are, the more stretch you're gonna feel.
And that just stretches kind of the different fibers of those muscles. Good. Not too bad, Amy.
That feels so good.
Okay, so the next one we're going to move into is just a shoulder extension stretch. So we'll get this chair out of the way. We're gonna use a slightly higher surface, and Amy's just gonna reach her arms back and kind of open through the front of her chest, and then she can sink into this kind of whatever feels good. This one you wanna move into slowly and gently. But this is a really nice opposition stretch for all the stuff we've done kind of here. She should feel a big stretch across front of pec, even all the way down into arms. And then back here, if you wiggle your fingers just a little bit, you get that extra stretch through kind of those forearms as well.
With this one, I would say same or similar to the lat stretch of if you bring your elbows close together there, you're getting a deeper stretch here. If you bring your hands closer together behind you, you're gonna feel more of that chest opening. And you can do this palm variation. So you can do it palm down, or you can do it palm up, and you might notice a different stretch. So keeping hands close together, walk away, keep your chest really tall, and then if you have a taller surface that you can lunge down on, that can be really helpful too.
Yeah, and no, Amy's still keeping in mind her spine here. She's not collapsing through anything. She's still really active. If you are kind of in that rounded position, you're actually gonna feel a different stretch.
And you don't wanna round through here. You're not actually stretching chest or anterior shoulder, which is the goal of this movement here.
Good. And then the last one we're gonna jump into is just a pec stretch. So Amy's gonna come over here to this, but at home, you can use a wall. And so go ahead, one arm's gonna be there. And then she's gonna wind herself open by kind of stepping through. There you go. And you can kind of change the angle of this arm too. You can slide it up a little bit or down a little bit. Sometimes that will give you a different stretch. Usually people have a tight section. This is mostly a pec stretch. Our pec is a fan-shaped muscle, so all those fibers kind of run in different directions.
And I'm keeping the foot that's closest to the hand that I'm stretching is the one that's stepping forward and rotating from my hip and my spine and my shoulder. And you can even play with, since you now know all the movements of your scapula, you can play with if my scapula is high versus if it's low, where do I feel a nice stretch through here? I'll say too, feeling the stretch in the muscle belly here is most important. If you feel kind of like a burny, zingy sensation through your armpit or even down into your hand, that's neural tension. Yeah. And our nerves don't like to be stretched. Our muscles like to be stretched. They're contractile. Nerves just kind of fold and have a finite distance. So you don't want to feel zingy, burny sensation through armpit or even down through fingers, but just muscle stretch. I would also add, in terms of stretching, cooling down, warming up, we talked about warming up being dynamic, so you're really moving through. And then when you're stretching, you want it to be static at the end. So Sarah mentioned 30 seconds just to kind of release things, and that can be a great way to cool down. If your goal is to lengthen the tissue, then you need to be holding that static stretch for minimum 2 minutes. Yeah. Breathing, sinking down into it, but tissue change does not occur in anything less than that. So keep that in mind if your goal is to increase flexibility.
Yeah, the other really important part that Amy briefly mentioned was just breathing. Anytime you're in any of these stretches, it's really important for us to take those nice deep breaths. That signals to our nervous system that we're safe, we can relax, and it allows you to have kind of a safer, deeper stretch.
Any other variations of your cool down can keep those same principles in here. We just kind of gave you 3 main stretches of what climbers are most typically tight in and how to use some of those cues of what muscle am I stretching and how can I move my body part to make that stretch better. And as always, just ask us questions if you have more.
Hopefully you found this informative and useful for helping you progress those basic push-ups, those basic planks into something that's gonna give you a little bit more edge to kind of get to that next level.
On the principles that we described, especially those 3 principles and understanding your anatomy, we really recommend taking that into your climbing, taking that into your warm-up, especially when you're on your project. You are not going to be thinking about where your shoulder blade is and is your elbow pit exposed on the crux move. So really use your warm-up for that time. As you're warming up, think through those 3 principles with each move, and that's only going to help your stability on the wall too. So is my elbow pit exposed? Are my shoulder blades engaged kind of down and forward because my arm is in front of me? And is my spine in an optimal position? Using your warm-up in that time to apply these principles can be a really helpful way to transition healthy, strong, stable shoulders into your climbing.
All the strength in the world is not going to prevent you from having an injury unless you're kind of putting it all together. That mobility is important. The ability to control all that strength is really important. So it's really easy for us to train all the like fancy, glorious stuff, but getting into the nitty gritty and really understanding how your body works is going to be the thing that keeps you climbing the longest. If you guys have any further questions, we'll leave our contact information. Feel free to reach out to us via an email. We also check out our website. We have a ton of free information, so lots of articles about how to heal finger injuries and rice buckets and all kinds of things for you guys to check out. But if you're interested in getting a little bit more one-on-one work, we have a couple options. We do in-person sessions. We're doing all the COVID precautions to keep you guys safe. And then Amy, you want to tell them about the gym option?
Yeah, so we have a partnership with Momentum where we can do in-gym climbing assessments, and for that hour we're watching you climb or watching you campus board or watching you on your project or whatever it is where you feel like this is where I feel a little bit tweaky, or am I doing this in the way that you talked about in the video, or am I doing this in the most injury prevention type way? So we can do, having a doctor of physical therapy watching you climb can be of great benefit there. We also do, like Sarah said, in-clinic assessments, and then we can do virtual visits as well. So if you are high risk and you aren't wanting to be out in places, we can see you virtually, and then we're licensed, or our practitioners here are licensed in 12 different states, and you can check out our website to see if your state is part of that. And if it's not, and you know that you want to be seen here, then we can look at potentially getting licensed in different states as well. The 2 physical locations that we have clinics in are Salt Lake City in Sugar House Pacific and in Jackson, Wyoming.
The other option we actually have is we can do a wellness visit for people in any state. So if you're not dealing with a particular injury or need a diagnosis of anything, but you just want to have us look at your push-ups and look at some of your strength training form and make sure that that's following in line, we can do that with anybody.
Or hanging, hangboarding is something that we do wellness visits on a lot, which are easy to do virtually. And then our Instagram page, both like Grassroots Instagram and then some of our individual pages too, can have some different tidbits and things to help you through, especially with environmental modifications, because we can maybe climb with perfect form and push up with perfect form, but then if you work like this all day, that might not be beneficial to you and your injury prevention world. So check out our social media pages for such things. They're probably displayed here.